We're going to start with just a 1 minute silent meditation, and the people who are signed in online, we invite to join in and sit quietly for a minute. We will chant Om together at the beginning and then again at the end. All right, our second class, second chapter, and let's review just briefly what we covered in chapter 1. We covered the arc of involution, the downward arc that occurs over an enormous period of time, and discussed how the sparks of consciousness go through the various levels of experience, ever increasing in awareness and in consciousness. I don't think we used the term last time, but quite often you hear the term cribbed, cabined, and confined. What happens is it has to come down to a level low enough in manifestation that it has some kind of meaning. And the lowest part of that incoming arc is the mineral kingdom. So definitely it's extremely cribbed, cabined, and confined in order to have some kind of meaningful existence at a very low level of consciousness. But then over eons of time it continues to grow and to expand. Seems incredibly slow, but it has nowhere else to go and nothing else to do, so it doesn't really matter. And besides, as we'll find out in chapter 9, humans are the only ones who experience time. Every other creature has no concept of time like the human does. So we now, after eons of time, after going through the various kingdoms of nature, arrive at the human kingdom. And that's the topic of our conversation today, the human experience. What does it entail? What happens afterwards? I want to address one thing from last week and anything else that comes up if anyone has questions online or in the group here. One of the students who watched last week or 2 weeks ago brought up a question because we had talked about animals and how the very highest the examples of the animal kingdom have a fairly high degree of intelligence, at least compared to other animals. And his question was, if they have achieved that level of intelligence, even though it's limited, wouldn't that mean that they are able to create karma? A very good question. So, what is the answer? Paul's going to tell us.
Okay. I'll tell you. Oh, the other
The
Paul.
other Paul has it.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well, the soul also evolves, sure. I'll say a human kingdom isn't the only thing that evolves. The angelic kingdom evolves from the elemental up and occupy various stages of life. You mentioned rock. Rock has life. A little bit.
Right.
But it's where the soul evolves until it reaches the peak where it is able to handle the human kingdom. He does indeed, in my own personal opinion, involve lower animals through the evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm. And that was our discussion last week. We didn't talk too much about the angelic kingdom or the elemental kingdom. This is kind of an elementary, introductory level of theosophical concepts. But what Paul is mentioning is that even on the involutionary arc, there are kingdoms that we humans are unaware of, at least physically, because we can't see them and we are unable to interact with them directly. But some people can see them, and some people do have a minor degree of interaction with them. These would be the angels and the elemental kingdom. So getting back to animals, though, what is the idea about whether or not they create karma?
Sure. So the animal kingdom does display some pretty incredible intelligence in terms of certain of the higher animals. We mentioned last time how monkeys actually use tools. They'll use rock tools that they've created to open coconuts. Our student who asked the question mentioned sea otters and some aquatic life smashing clams on rocks under the water to break them open. So that's highly intelligent. But it's different from humans in that human beings reach what we call the age of reason when they reach the age of 7 or 8 years old. Before the age of reason, humans still are intelligent, but they're not held responsible for their actions such that no karma is being created from the actions of a toddler, for example. The highest intelligence displayed in the animal kingdom is equivalent to a child under the age of reason. So with that being said, the animals aren't necessarily creating the same type of karma that humans above the age of 8 are creating based on their free will, their ability to reason between right and wrong. So although the animals do have the intelligence enough so to create communities, to create families, to protect their family, to open clams on rocks and things like this, and to create traditions and perhaps even animal rituals, they don't have the ability to reason between right and wrong, thus they're not creating the same type of karma that we're discussing. There is some kind of karma. Karma means action. Every action, whether it's physical, I push forward something and it pushes back based on the laws of physics. Same thing happens with our thoughts and our emotions. So yes, there is some type of karma that those animals are creating, but it's not the same kind of karma that adult human beings are.
We're going to be discussing the idea of karma to a much greater degree in Chapter 7. So we don't want to spend too much time on it today. But as Paul said, every action has some kind of effect. And so that in itself is a type of karma. What we want to distinguish is that there is such a thing as personal karma, and there's such a thing as group karma. So humans are the only ones who create this individual personal karma that can carry over from one lifetime to another. Animals, plants, and minerals cannot create that type of karma that would carry over that long of a period of time. So any karma that they create is shared as a group. And we even share in it because we're all part of human, not human, but of all creation, of all consciousness. So we also share a part of the karma that is not personal, and we'll talk more about personal as opposed to group karma in chapter 7. Now, yes?
Is this a graduate, is moving from the animal to the human kingdom a graduation into the spiritual kingdom? Is that why karma has been evoked?
Well,
Let's repeat the question so everyone can hear.
okay, so the question is the individual moving from the animal kingdom into the human kingdom entering the spiritual kingdom? Potentially. Because the human kingdom, when a person becomes truly human, and that means quite advanced, they are a part of the spiritual hierarchy. That's someone who has passed a certain initiation and is trained enough that that individual can be useful as a tool and as an instrument in the uplifting of humanity and all other kingdoms of nature. But for long periods of time in the human kingdom, we are not yet at that stage. We still exhibit a lot of animal characteristics, and it has everything to do with our ego. We're going to be talking a lot about ego today.
I'd like to add to that. Don't forget that every single thing, we just mentioned this, rocks, and of course certainly plants and animals, and of course humans, have spirit, our spirit. We're going to be showing a graphic in just a moment about our spirit-matter continuum. There's nothing in existence that is not spirit. So when the consciousness that inhabits a higher animal does graduate to the human realm, it's not that they're entering spirit per se more than they were. They were spirit before. There's spirit in all of us. There's spirit in every single atom. But they are graduating into a different realm of existence. The human realm has its own soul. Each human being has a soul, or in theosophical terminology, each soul has a human body. It's the opposite way around. Animals, it's not that way. One animal does not have a soul. One animal soul does not have an animal body. It's a different concept, which we'll get into at a different time. So that's a little bit different way to understand the graduation from the animal into the human realm.
All right, the chapter starts out with a story about the magic toy. Is there anyone who did not have the opportunity to read this ahead of time? Everybody was able to read it? Okay. All right. So then you are familiar with the story of the magic toy, the young boy who saw something twirled in the sunlight that became his greatest passion, something he absolutely had to own and possess. So let's kind of analyze this story a little bit. First of all, he was sometimes in a good mood before the event of the toy that appeared. He was sometimes in a good mood because he had discovered something new. Other times he got bored because nothing new was happening, and he would get cranky and fretful. Does that sound like any of us? Certainly sounds like me.
He's honest.
We get bored. We do get bored. And we're looking for something new, usually some kind of stimulation, isn't it? People need some kind of stimulation. So his mood would change from day to day and from hour to hour during the day. So when this magic toy appeared that he had never seen before, all of a sudden there was something different Before, if he saw something, it was very easy to grab it and put it in his mouth like kids do, and test it, taste it, check it out, possess it, and then throw it away. But this time, it was special because, why?
Couldn't reach it.
He couldn't reach it. It was out of grasp. It was out of reach. And that made all the difference in the world. So what did that create?
Stress.
Stress.
Desire.
More desire.
Growth.
More desire. He wanted it. What is one of the favorite words of every 2-year-old?
Mine.
Mine.
And where does the phrase come from? You always want what you don't have, or the grass is greener?
So, yes, it's this need to possess something to make it mine. So what does that entail? It entails our sense of identity, doesn't it? Eckhart Tolle points that out very eloquently in his book, A New Earth. It's all, the first few chapters are all about the ego and identity and self-identity. So how does it come about, this idea of who I am? Tim Boyd gave a wonderful talk at the Miami, at the conference for the Florida Federation in Miami. And it was about identity and what evolves. So as he mentioned in his talk, when the child is born, or at least when he was born, he was using himself as an example. In the 1950s, they didn't have ways to predict, to determine the sex of the baby until after it was born. So one of the first things that happens is the doctor or the nurse announces, congratulations, you have a baby girl or a baby boy. So all of a sudden, this brand new individual who has no self-identity is starting to acquire. Now, all of a sudden, he or she is only part of 1/2 of the entire population in the world. They've been restricted now from being a human being to now being only a part of a group that consists of 50% of all human beings. And then what else gets added? He gets a first name, Tim. Okay, well that restricts it down to several million people who are named Tim or Timothy. And then he gets a last name. And that restricts it further to a very relatively small group of people who share that last name. Then a religion is applied, an ethnic group, a nationality, a residence. So little by little, this individual who was wide open at the beginning now is restricted to a very specific role. Not that he or she has to assume it, but there is so much pressure that it's automatic. It's very easy to just fulfill the desires and needs and expectations of other people, at least in the beginning. Later, when they become 14, they start trying to break out of that. But for the first few years, children are very, very malleable, and they assume this identity that really is imposed on them from outside. Then what happens? Well, we go through the same thing lifetime after lifetime of assuming an identity. But the question is, how important is it? We're going to see that it is very important for a very long period of time. It's only a very advanced individual who is ready to start casting that off, getting rid of this self-imposed and imposed from other people identity that defines us. So let's continue with this story here. He absolutely had to have it. Why? Because that would enhance his feeling of self-identity. That would set him apart. That would make him feel more important. Have you ever tried to take a toy away from a kid that had identified with that toy? Oh, you would think that you were trying to kill them. No, I mean, their world shatters, it falls apart. And then 5 seconds later, they discover another toy, and they've completely forgotten the first one. We as adults don't forget quite so easily. We tend to hang on to things much more for a much longer period of time. And it's harder for us to disidentify it than it is for children. I notice this, and I think we all do, in situations where young children have something drastic that occurs. They may have a parent that dies, or they may be have to go live with a different relative. The younger they are, the faster they seem to adapt to the new environment and to accept it and to forget about the past. But as they get older, that becomes very difficult. They are much more attached to their memories and to former circumstances, and they often resent this imposed change in their lives. Even moving to a new school, if you ever had children where they had to be uprooted from one school and moved to another one, especially if they're teenagers, that to them is a huge change, and it's not easy. But if it's a first or second grader, they seem to adapt far easier. So what were some of the things he used to try to get his desire? When he couldn't, what?
Emotion.
Emotion. What did he do? He
Right.
threw a fit. Anybody ever seen a kid throw a tantrum? You've done it. You still do, right?
No.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it in the grocery store. Mom says, no, you can't have that, and he throws himself on the floor and screams like bloody murder. And if the parent is wise, he or she will just ignore the kid and maybe even say, I have no idea whose kid that is. But no, we learn very early in life to manipulate other people by using emotions. And kids can get their parents wrapped around their little finger and get just about anything they want sometimes. It takes a very wise and a strong parent to resist sometimes the desires. So life does the same thing with us. We are given what we need in life, but we sometimes resist that. All right, so temper tantrums. And then when that doesn't work, what else do? We beg and plead, don't we? Paul's going to tell us about that, begging and pleading.
Oh, I am?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. That's funny. Okay. Okay, good. Now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you were mentioning begging and pleading, and we can talk about praying. Praying is a form of asking. I mean, in a gentler sense, asking, please, please, take pity. I'm begging, whatever God that we pray to, or whatever entity we pray to. We're asking for support and change from an outside source, and we're basically not asserting any power of our own through that. Yes, Paul.
Who is asking this?
Who's asking this? Some people who pray do this.
The ego is asking.
Bingo. The ego is asking and pleading, right. There's no true power in the ego, is there? It's an illusion.
You're a kid.
It's a bugger, right? That's a good point. The ego prays and begs and pleads.
And we want to point out that we're not putting down people who use prayer. We have lots of friends and relatives, and even we pray. But I think it requires the right attitude. the attitude shouldn't be that someone has made a mistake, or that we feel that we know what is best for someone. When it comes right down to it, we have to accept whatever nature has given us, whether you call it God or nature, the universe, or life. You can use any of these terms. And we don't deny people who want to continue to pray. That's absolutely their prerogative. But I think we have another idea which may be more helpful for some people. And that is
Meditation. Instead of asking for something from outside of you as if you didn't have it, ask it from within, which is where everything resides anyway. The whole universe is at our disposal should we open our eyes and awaken to how to access it and how to remember our innate connection and joining with it. There's no separation. Terry was talking about the process of acquiring identities and cribbing, cabining, and confining our divine essence. When a human baby is born, you're no longer a part of the divine reality. You are now John W. Smith, member of this family in this city, in this state, and you are going to this school, and you're a boy, so you are blue, not pink, this and this. So we have individualized ourselves to the point that we're alone, relatively speaking, forgetting our connection to the world at its highest level, forgetting our connection to God, divine being, as Eckhart Tolle calls it, being. And this process of evolution, so involution down into matter and evolving back towards source, the prodigal son story, is remembering and realizing and living our connection to the divine, to everyone and everything around us. One of the tenets of the Theosophical Society is universal brotherhood. Well, the process of identifying ourselves with things and putting ourselves into a role or into several roles in life is kind of like taking away the idea of universal brotherhood. And it's our goal as spiritual seekers to remember universal brotherhood. We're all part of the same family. And let's not get caught up on the gender identification of the word brotherhood. It's just familyhood or siblinghood. We're all part of one energy, one life, one being. And in the human realm, we perceive ourselves to be individualistic. I'm not sure how I got on that topic.
All
We're
right.
back on the magic toy.
So the magic toy. What was the boy's objective? Questions?
Not yet.
What was the boy's objective?
I have it.
To obtain it, possess it, to own it. And what was the God's objective?
Nothing.
Well, he had an objective. What was it?
To earn it, to learn how to walk.
Teach him how to walk. Yeah, he was using a tool to entice this young boy to get him to learn how to walk. And so both got their wish. The boy figured out after a time, it took him a while and it took a lot of effort and a lot of failed efforts before he got his wish, but he did obtain it. And the God got his objective because he taught the boy how to walk. So what was the first reaction of the boy when he got it? Yay. Yay, elation.
Enjoy.
I got it.
Wait,
It's
be
mine.
careful. Someone said bliss, but...
Oh.
Right at it.
Well, joy, a moment of elation, but it was an emotional reaction. Yay, that's mine. So, a great outpouring of emotion. Before he had a great outpouring of emotion when he was crying and weeping and wailing. Now he has an outpouring of emotion that is joyous and gleeful. So he continues, and he every day makes sure he has his toy and he's playing with it and enjoying it. But what happens over time?
Boredom.
Boredom, same as before. It just took longer this time. So one day he woke up and was shocked, absolutely shocked. He thought that he owned the most important, most valuable object in the world. And what did he own instead?
Piece of junk.
A piece
Piece
of
of
worthless
glass.
junk. It was not worth 50 cents. And he was very upset about that. So his reaction, again, an emotional reaction, was anger and frustration. And he took it and threw it on the ground and broke it to bits. So it's a dramatic way of showing the same thing that life uses to teach all of us lessons. Do we have any magic toys? Do you have any magic toys?
We would, yeah. And I'm hanging on to them for dear life because they give me identity. Who would I be if I didn't have the car I drove?
Exactly.
I'd obviously be no one, right?
Yeah.
If I didn't have my house, I might as well just go away somewhere and,
Good sign.
oh yeah, stand on the side of the road.
So what are some of the magic toys that we all accumulate or desire or wish for?
Guitars.
Guitars, but not just any guitar, right?
No.
Oh no, it has to be a name brand, right?
No.
Oh, it has to be a collectible.
No, it's how it plays, not sound.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful clothes,
And if
furs, jewelry.
The jewelry,
Beautiful
clothes.
furs.
Those are jewels too.
If you want a violin, it has to be a Stradivarius, right? No.
Does it
Okay.
sound like
So anyway, you all know.
Well, I have a question. What makes a toy or a thing, what makes a thing a magic toy that we're talking about? What's the difference between a guitar that you have, William, and then a magic toy that we're talking about here?
a credit card?
How much it costs, right?
The desire that you must have it.
Girlfriends and boyfriends are toys, and a castle in Tuscany for Rhonda is definitely a toy. I'm sorry, you said what now? About what makes a thing a toy?
Where you're motivated to where you must have it.
Desire.
I think, oh, no, not, that's lightweight. Desire, no. Person desire.
Jim, can we put up our Eckhart Tolle quotes, please? The desire to have it is what causes a neutral object to become a magic toy.
All right, so one thing that Eckhart Tolle says is ego is no more than this: identification with form, which primarily means thought forms. So he's using form in the theosophical sense, that it is anything that is in manifestation. Doesn't mean that it's physical necessarily, it can be, but it's a thought, an emotion, something that you
That you
can
want.
express. If it can be expressed, then it is a form. And so we become identified with these ideas, these thoughts, and we think, that is me, that's my identity.
Incidentally, the word identity actually comes from a Latin root which means to make the same. So when you identify with things that you have, something in your psyche, in what Eckhart Tolle calls the ego, you're giving yourself the same identity as the thing that you want and that you think is making yourself worthy, and worth more, and valuable.
And that's the key. Isn't it true that when we identify with these things, we feel that we have more value? We're seeking to be more valuable and to feel worthy. Not necessarily worthy, but to feel important. We need to feel important. Now, we're not saying that this is not a good thing. In fact, for 99.99% of all humanity, this is the way it needs to be and has to be.
I would substitute the word complete to feel complete.
Yes, exactly. But what happens? Here's what's very strange about it. You find a magic toy, and it may be like a university title. Maybe you want to be a doctor of philosophy or something. Maybe that's your magic toy for the time being. And you work very diligently for several years to obtain it. You engage other people to help you attain that goal. And you work yourself ruthlessly and make yourself ill maybe because you overwork yourself to gain that goal. And then once you've got it, then what happens?
You lose interest in it.
It works for a while, and sometimes for several years. It does, like Rosalie said. But eventually it loses luster. It isn't quite as attractive as it used to be. It wasn't what you thought it was going to be. It didn't bring you the everlasting happiness that you were certain that it was going to. Paul's laughing over here.
I'm sorry, you just blew me out of my mind of my first.
So then what do you have to do? Come up with another magic toy, don't you? Maybe it's a house, maybe it's a mini mansion, maybe it's a Rolls Royce, I don't know. But you know, we have different degrees of needs. Some people are happy with one level of car, but some people that would absolutely not work at all for them.
There's one more quote by Eckhart Tolle on the screen. It's number 2 for our online guests. I try to find myself in things, but never quite make it, and I end up losing myself in them. This is the fate of the ego. It's a never-ending, constant search.
Right.
It's a cycle. When we think that these things, the next level up of luxury car, okay, well, if I just get that trim package with the backup camera and the navigation system, then I'll have it. So we get it sometimes, though, right? Some of us go and get that, and then what we're saying, it fades, and then what happens? The ego wants more. There's something really funny about the ego. Well, there are a lot of funny things about it, but this is one funny thing about it. If you really analyze how the ego operates, it wants to want more than it wants to have. That's the motivation behind it. The ego doesn't want you to actually have it, because once you've got it, that's it. It's over. The ego has been satisfied. It wants to want something more. That's the whole motivation for doing things in life. Yes, Paul?
Ego is there for a purpose, sure.
Exactly. It is there for a purpose.
It's there to be overcome, to grow on. It's like the wind that strengthens the corn.
Oh, the ego is important. Yes, it's there for a reason.
Ego is to distract you from your primary objective, which is the spiritual evolution.
But keep in mind that ego is the tool that nature or God uses to entice you, to get you to move along, to expand your consciousness. Without it, we would sit like vegetables and would do nothing. So it's absolutely important, and we want to recognize that.
Good question. Paul DB says, we have 3 Pauls participating here today.
Number one.
Is it ego if one wants something for sentimental reasons?
Yes.
Okay, the answer is yes. Actually, that's the key. Sentimental is an emotion. If there is emotion involved, then there is ego involved, yes.
Buddha tells us to let everything go, including souvenirs and memories. They just hold you down.
In chapter 9, we're going to talk about the power of the eternal now. And it's a lot about letting go and about non-attachment. This whole thing is going to repeat itself over and over in different ways as we go. So we're laying the groundwork now, and hopefully by the time we get to chapter 15, you will all be this close to becoming adepts.
Eckhart Tolle does have a very pain and attachment. I am the awareness. I be aware that it is attachment.
Yes, and that's the first step.
Is the awareness. The awareness is always the first step.
Page 46. I never forgot that. It was wonderful.
Rosalie quoted the page number.
Wow.
I have another comment on wanting something for sentimental reasons. This is number 3 for our online students, the quote on the screen here. Regarding things, and this is from Eckhart Tolle, we need to honor the world of things, not despise it. Each thing has beingness, and beingness is the word that Eckhart Tolle uses to describe divinity or God or the highest level of existence. We need to honor the world of things, not despise it. Each thing has beingness, is a temporary form that has its origin within the formless one life, the source of all things, all bodies, all forms. But we cannot honor things if we use them as a means to self-enhancement. This is what the ego does. So this is the key. If we need or want something for survival, for example, or to satisfy a basic need of ours, shelter, transportation, point A to point B, that's honoring the world of things, and that's using things for necessity. But it's when we have the need and the desire to self-enhance, that's when the ego is involved. And that's our gauge. And no one can ever gauge that for you. It's always internal. We can only judge for ourselves. Do I want that for self-enhancement, or do I want that for basic transportation from point A to B, or for a roof over my head, or clothing on my back? No one can ever answer it for you.
This is absolutely right. We need to be assessing as we go through life and asking ourselves this very question. Am I doing this for selfish reasons, to enhance my ego, to make myself feel more important? Or is it in order that I can become an instrument for the service of humanity? And someone had a question?
I have some gifts. I have the gift of writing music. I have the gift of singing music, of playing music. As my skill increases, I need better tools. As my guitar playing increases, I need better guitars. As my voice improves, I get microphones that are so sensitive they can hear the gargle forming in your throat, just about. So is what you're telling me I need to forget this silly dream and go sit on a mountaintop?
Not at all. Not at all.
It's what Paul says. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's asking yourself the question, am I acquiring these new things, tools, as you just said, to self-enhance and make myself look better to others, or are they necessities for some goal I'm achieving or for some path I'm on? Is there ego involved? That's only a question you can ask yourself.
And we can't judge you. I mean, we as a whole judge people all the time, but we learn not to judge, and for the very reason that you are the only one who needs to judge yourself, and you should do it on a regular basis, not as a judgment, but as an observation. Just being aware of really what your true motive is. We're going to learn later that honesty is one of the first qualities that you've got to develop. Complete, total, 100% honesty, which is extremely rare.
So can this kind of, Paul was talking about, we need to overcome overcome the ego.
Guys, I need to interrupt you.
Yes. I'm sorry.
We cannot
yes,
hear what we cannot hear your audience, so you guys need to repeat everything.
We need to repeat.
It's like we're hearing one side of the conversation.
Okay.
Please.
So make the question short, very short, so we can repeat it.
So if all acquisition is ego-based, and if Paul is right that we must overcome ego, then we should not acquire anything.
But the acquisition is not ego-based. Okay. The question was, if all acquisition is ego-based and we need to eliminate the ego, we should not acquire anything. But no, acquiring things is not all ego-based. It depends on if you're acquiring them to enhance yourself and make yourself look better in front of others, or if you're just acquiring them as a tool to use in your trade that is necessary. I have a perfect example of this. This is a personal story. I'm in the business of real estate. My business is to drive clients around looking at houses. And sometimes I drive people looking at $50,000 condos, and sometimes I drive people looking at $2 million houses. In 2007, I sold my Nissan Maxima and purchased a Lexus SUV. And I was terrified to be seen in my Lexus. I parked it in a different parking lot at the office and walked to my office for the first month because I didn't want people to see me driving a Lexus.
So you were attached to your image of who, that they would think that you were stepping outside of your spiritual
You're no longer a man
persona.
of the people.
Okay.
I would say there's a fine line between some of this, a very fine line.
There is a fine line,
In
yes.
other words, you want to get your teeth look like fixed, you want to do it because you want to look better or because you really need it.
So do
We
you,
have
yeah,
more questions.
Rosalie says, do you do it because you need it or because you want it?
We have a question. Selfish versus selfless. That's a good gauge on acquiring things. I believe that's what the question means. Selfish versus selfless. Are you acquiring this for a selfish reason or a selfless reason?
All right, let's read another quote by Eckhart Tolle, our favorite theosophist. The greatest,
Psychiatrist. Also.
the greatest achievement of humanity is not its works of art, science, or technology, but the recognition of its own dysfunction, its own madness. Bernard brought something that he had found in a magazine, an article about economics, and it gave the whole story of what we were just talking about. How you want something, you get that something, you enjoy that something, you lose interest in that something, and then you decide that you're bored and you want something else. So even humanity in general is figuring out that this is a mad cycle that we're pursuing, and that it's a dog chasing its tail. No matter what you get, no matter how high you set the goal, it's never quite enough. So what do? We sit down and we start thinking and analyzing. Well, if it's not more that I need, then what is it that I need in order to become something more enlightened? Well,
That's why they had these hoarding programs on television, the hoarding.
Hoarding program.
hoarding, that's, Rosalie said, that's why they have programs about hoarding. And that's the, obviously, the epitome
Extreme.
of wanting more is hoarding.
We have another question. Is this why spirit is the peace the world cannot give? Is that why spirit is the peace the world cannot give? That's from Meredith.
The peace that the world cannot give.
She's saying the world meaning physical, the physical. Okay.
Rephrase the question.
She's
Yeah,
talking with it.
Rephrase it.
We can only find an ananda or true bliss at the level of the soul, which has nothing to do with physical things. That might be where she's going with that. There's no everlasting happiness in the physical world. We cannot find happiness through buying a new guitar, although I would like to. William and I both play guitars. Things don't bring us bliss. Yes, okay, that's what she's
But
saying.
actually, I'm
Things
at a
don't.
place where I have everything I need. There's nothing I need. I have all the tools I need. Just don't question.
Okay, we have one more quote here. Let's see.
4. Renunciation of possessions will not automatically free you of the ego. So Eckhart Tolle is saying, don't just decide that you're going to get rid of things. It will attempt to ensure its survival by finding something else to identify with. For example, a mental image of yourself as someone who has transcended all interest in material possessions and is therefore superior, is more spiritual than others.
So it's trading one type of role for another, one type of magic toy for another.
So in other words, the ego in wearing the robes of a Buddhist monk may be greater than the ego of a businessman wearing an Armani suit.
Who are you? I'm a Buddhist who wears robes. I'm a spiritual person. Could be. We're not saying that the person is or not. They can only answer that themselves. We all can. We're just making ourselves aware.
So what he's pointed out here is that as we progress, as we become a little more enlightened, we trade some magic toys for others. They're still magic toys. Here's the big question. for those who are, somewhat enlightened, slightly enlightened, as my sister likes to say,
Slightly enlightened.
what are some of the toys that we have substituted for the ones that are most obvious? Maybe we don't need fancy cars or big houses anymore, but what do we substitute instead? Any ideas? Online students? Somebody?
Our practices.
Our practices,
So whether that means
like rituals or
rituals were like maybe yoga has become our ego, the badge per se,
Mhm.
to show enlightenment or to show that we're on a path.
All
How
right.
we interact with that.
Pilates.
Okay, so we may announce to everybody, oh yeah, I practice yoga, I practice meditation, I practice Pilates, or
Stacia says Tibetan bowls, like the ones sitting right there.
Tibetan bowls, very good, very good. So the question is, are we attached to it? Yeah.
From what?
So ritual or ceremony, quite often we do get attached to them.
The question we can ask ourselves is, if this is taken from us, what will our reaction be, if any? And if there is a reaction, then we may be attached to it. We may be attached to it if there is a reaction.
Well, I
That's,
think in his book, as I remember reading, that you can't just say, I'm just going to get rid of him. You can't, that isn't the way. Well, it's a gradual thing. And he said, it's just, don't force it. Just work on it
Right.
on a daily basis.
It is gradual, yes. Rosalie is
Very
saying
gradual.
that renunciation is not cold turkey, like stopping smoking, right? It's a gradual process, perhaps, working on it every day.
all right, any other ideas of what we may substitute, things that we may be attached to?
Titles in an organization.
I'm attached to time,
Time,
yeah, personal time.
okay. Bernard says he's attached to personal time.
I don't let anything interfere with things that I want to do in my space, and which take personal time.
He doesn't like things to interfere with his personal time and his personal space. Someone else had a comment?
Well, it wasn't a very nice comment, sorry.
It wasn't a very nice
Personal
comment.
time. It's an ego thing, personal time. There is no such thing as time.
Right?
From the spirit point of view, it only exists in the physical world. And if you're concerned with time and how long it takes this, that, and the other, you probably need to get out of physical.
Paul says if we're too concerned with time, and since it only exists in the physical, maybe we need to get out of the physical, and that's a very good point, and we do that through meditation.
That's exactly the goal.
And Annie Besant said, if you have you need something to do, if you don't have the time to do something, it's not for you to do. And that's a quote from her.
Lisa has a comment.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, she did say that
That's a good one.
if it's something that I don't have the time to do, then it's not my job to do
Yeah,
it.
that's a
And
real
you
quote
do.
from
You
her
have to.
book.
You have people who are constantly requesting your time and your attention and your help with achieving their goals. Well, ask yourself whether there's any ego on the part of that person who's asking for your help. Ask what their motivation is. I mean, not to them, but to yourself. Analyze it carefully, because a lot of times we waste a lot of our energy helping other people to achieve their own personal ego-centered goals. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but just be aware that that's what you're doing. And can your time and your work and your efforts be used to better advantage in a different direction? I have often had to...
Amen. She says amen.
I've often had to turn people down, and I don't like to do it. But it took me a long time to learn to say no. I used to say yes when I really meant no. But I finally learned that you do better when you do turn down some of these projects that people try to heap on you.
Our online student Meredith says, good point, Paul. She's attached to being on time, and it can bring suffering. So good point. And I have a comment on that about how you said that time is an illusion. It doesn't even really exist, right? Only in the physical we perceive time. And you said maybe we need to get out of the physical. Well, that is a major concept in not only our book, but in theosophical teachings in general, is to reorient our consciousness out of our physical body, which is only one small part of us, and reorient our main consciousness, get it rooted in our true self, which is our soul, our higher self, or our true self. Why is it called our true self? Because that's the everlasting part of our being that endures physical lifetime after physical lifetime, where none of this ego-driven wanting and desire and time and emotion exists. Nothing like that exists at the level of the soul. And our consciousness can be there. We just haven't learned, some of us may have, learned how to transcend the physical. And that's what meditation is all about. That's what being calm and focusing on your inside versus your outside world is all about. It's strengthening the connection between our physical and our spiritual and our more spiritual aspect. And time doesn't exist there. So another good point, Paul.
Yes.
Much earlier in the talk, you said, what will happen to you if you take it away? And I had a major epiphany in healing, and I thank you. That in many areas of my life I have too much stuff. When you said that, I started thinking about blankets and sleeping bags. And I have probably 7 sleeping bags and 10 blankets in there to take to the homeless. And then I go, oh, I lost my blanket when I was 3 years old, was left on a tree. What do you do when it's taken away? You make sure it will never happen again. By accumulating too much stuff. So I'm thinking that the key to a lot of my mini hoarding is that experience, so that you take it away.
Being worried about having physical things ripped from you could cause the opposite effect and have you hold on to them so tight or accumulate extra, which might result in hoarding.
Mm-hmm.
That was a
So
comment
having
from
money
William.
was ripped from me.
So obviously the first step is always awareness, and just watch yourself. It takes years to learn to recognize it. Just that alone takes a long period of effort before you can do that. Let's go on to this topic here.
Okay.
What constitutes success? We all see people who set this major goal, sometimes involving millions of dollars and other people. And
What constitutes success? Well, could it be achieving a goal? Something you set out to do at the beginning? Eckhart Tolle's definition of success is a little bit different. He talks about someone who has achieved financial success in a business, but most people don't think about the process of getting there. The process of getting towards your own success is quite possibly more important than the success itself. Who did you affect on the way towards this success? Did you affect people in a positive or a negative way? Did you cause suffering? Did you trample over people? Did you put other companies out of business while your company rose to power? Or did you do everything in an altruistic manner where you helped others towards success also? What was the method by which you reached your goal? Everything depends on the method and the intention and the motive, not the end result necessarily. It's very important to analyze why and how we do things, not only the end goal. You have a good example from Bill Gates, where he has achieved one of the highest levels of net worth on the planet right now. How has he done that? Has he put out other companies out of business, or he has a Bill Gates Foundation? It's interesting to analyze these ultra monetarily wealthy people to see how they've gotten there and what has happened along the way.
Yes.
We look at Bill Gates from a karmic point of view. I mean, that guy must have done some incredibly good stuff.
Looking at Bill Gates from a
to have
karmic
gotten
point
what
of
he
view.
got. You know, is he in some respects a saint?
Okay.
Because of what he's doing
It could
with
be
what he's
he's
done.
gotta learn to handle that power that he's got.
So is Bill Gates receiving positive karma from something he's done in the past in order to have what he has
Oh, yes.
today? And is he
Absolutely.
considered, could he be considered somewhat of a saint for what he is today?
And is Donald Trump the anti-Bill Gates?
Well, that's not for us to judge, but we certainly do need to take a look and just try to at least get some insight into other people. I don't personally know either of these individuals myself, but I do know other individuals in life who have done similar things, maybe not on quite such a grand scale. And I find that for the most part, even though they have achieved something quite dramatic and quite impressive to most people, there is quite a bit of damage that occurs along the way, both to their own health, their level of stress, the stress that they cause to partners, family members, children, co-workers. So can I say that that applies to everyone? Certainly not. I'm not going to even try to judge other people, but I can make some observations of the people that I've known personally. And what I find is that there's an enormous opportunity for trampling over other people. If you are not really somewhat enlightened, it's very easy to take the easy way, which involves kind of ignoring other people's welfare.
Amen, Statius.
All right.
We should probably move, oh, yeah, hi Eugene, yes.
I guess I would just have a comment that, that's, again, would be sort of a one thought when we think if you were to say that Bill Gates has good karma because he's created what he's created. Taking in mind also there's been huge prices that he's paid for that, how it's affected the world either in good ways or positive ways or negative ways. So to say that it's all a plus because he's had this knowledge and he's had this impact on the world is part of what we'll discuss on karma, I'm assuming, further down the line when it's more about, where it's not about just oneness, but it's about the whole. Yeah.
Repeat the first part of your statement.
Well, the statement that Paul made was about, could Bill Gates sort of be very blessed and sort of saintly in the fact that he's created this immense wealth and technology for the world. That was Paul's comment, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my comment was that's still looking at karma from our oneness versus from the perspective of it being inclusive of all, and so that maybe there's a price he's paying for being in this role to move us forward. Does that make sense? From our place.
Okay, so following up on that, is kind of the idea that yes, it may be that he has created a certain amount of good karma, but that there are also some results that are maybe not so positive, and that he's taking on a role that is a little more universal or global in scope. So in some ways he may be accumulating almost like a massive karma.
Actually, that would be Dharma.
Dharma?
What he's doing now.
It could be. It could be. Anyway, we're getting a little off the subject because we're talking more about karma, which we're going to talk about in Chapter 7. We do need to move along here. We've only got...
Jim, can we ask you to put on our Chapter 2 PDF, please? All right. So I'll move on to, yep. Know thyself. Okay. Okay. Know thyself. Nose te ipsum. We've all heard that, yes? Does anyone know what that means? It may seem pretty straightforward, right?
Know thyself and know God, and the universe.
Know thyself, know God, know the universe.
And the universe.
Any thoughts from our online students on what know thyself actually means?
Know your higher self.
Know our higher self. What do you mean by that?
What our whole motive for being in this life is, For before we came in here, we set certain goals, to achieve, and that's in our higher self, So to know yourself, you really have to know your higher self.
Yes. Our true self. Yes, you're referring to our true self, which could also be called our soul. Getting in touch with our soul, understanding our dharma, as was said earlier, understanding human psychology at a deep level, not only at the level that current academics teach it. We have someone in the room who's a psychology major, and she studied psychology in college. But that's the exoteric form of psychology. That's brain activity. That's currently acceptable means of human interaction. But in esoteric sciences, theosophy and spiritual studies, there's a lot more to the human mind than what is studied in schools. And it's our duty as spiritual seekers to know ourselves at a higher level. And we do that through meditation. We do that through being still and being quiet and accessing the power of now, as Terry mentioned earlier. There's only one way to get in touch with our true self and to know it, and that's to still our emotions, which allows us to see clearly. Again, as I said earlier, there's nothing at the soul level that's muddled and distorted. Everything is pure, and that's where true ananda, bliss, exists. But down here in the physical, we have our emotions, we have our thoughts, our feelings, which are necessary, but it's our duty to calm them. It's our duty to calm our emotions so we can see clearly and so we can know ourselves. This is nose te ipsum. It's an ancient Greek a maxim that was inscribed onto the Apollo at Delphi. It's ancient. It's an ancient teaching that is still very, very applicable today. Any thoughts on nose te ipsum?
Well, what Al said is very important. Know your higher self, your soul. It is said that the soul, your higher self, is already a master at its own level. It can only progress through the personality. It can't do anything separate on its own. In fact, for many, many eons, while you are, not you, but while there are various incarnations going on, it is basically in a state of meditation, waiting for one of these personalities to begin to awaken. And only when it starts to perceive the possibility of achieving some kind of connection with this higher aspect of its nature, in other words, yoga, the union between the personality and the higher self, only when that personality starts to come into alignment and to open up that connection can there be any real interest from the soul. It has no interest in what things most people are interested in. It doesn't care about football, about TV commercials, about what food you're eating for lunch. It doesn't care about any of these things. That has no importance whatsoever to it. What is important to it is your spiritual unfoldment, your continued opening of awareness and consciousness.
There's one specific practice that we can work on right now and always in order to start this process, and that's scrupulous honesty. This is something that's overlooked, and it's not a huge deal in a lot of spiritual teachings, but it's so paramount because not being honest creates veils that are being pulled down. It's almost like blanketing yourself from breaking ourselves off from truth even more than we already perceive ourselves to be in this physical world with our physical senses. Lying or telling even white lies or just changing the truth or spinning the truth a little bit muddles things, and it deepens our disconnect to our higher self. It's hard to know our true selves when we're not even being honest. And we're talking mainly about being honest with ourselves. Of course, telling a lie to someone is not being honest, but what about what we tell ourselves? Do we spin the truth to ourselves so much that we believe, what we tell ourselves, or do we try our best to see things as they are? One of his most awesome quotes that I use in my life almost every day is, find the brightest flashlight you can find and shine it in every corner of your life, metaphorically speaking. And when things are brought into light, acknowledge them as they are. Don't play them down. We all have faults. We all have faults. And if we see them for what they are, that is the first step. It's the awareness Rosalie was talking about. It's when we try to change them around and make them seem like they're not faults. Oh, I just did that because of that. I do this. I mean, we all do this.
That's called justification.
It's justification. Oh, that's not really that bad. Just look at it this way and it's okay. The brightest spotlight, bring it into the light and see it. Wow, that's really me, isn't it? I better do something about that. And if you can be honest about that, that is the first step to getting to know your true self. You're removing layers, peeling back the onion, removing the veils. We're expanding into the essence of our true divinity, which
And
there
a
cannot
weight's
be.
been lifted off my shoulders.
A weight has been lifted.
And
A weight has been lifted.
keep in mind that every time we spin the truth, every time we try to justify something we've done, it's ego that is involved. If we had no ego, it wouldn't matter at all what other people think of us, or we would have no reason to lie or to manipulate the truth at all. Do you sometimes reveal only part of the truth to people and keep aside some of the facts that maybe wouldn't look so good to? Yeah, I do it. And so that's the sort of thing we're talking about. It's not enough just to be honest about your income taxes and pay the right amount of taxes. When you're going to tread this path, you've got to look at very tiny aspects of your life. Other people maybe aren't to that point yet. They've got more difficult things to deal with. But hopefully we've eliminated some of the more obvious obstacles to our growth. Now we need to focus on some of the little teeny things that are causing us to stumble.
Meredith, svadhyaya, I'm not sure how to pronounce that properly, self-reflection, a Sanskrit word that I'm not familiar with.
Yes, I don't know it that well, but
Self-reflection.
we will get some more information on it.
And Stacia says authenticity, yes, being authentic. That's what we're talking about.
Being authentic. Let's put up the last quote here.
Jim, can we have the Eckhart Tolle quotes again, please? Going back and forth.
Oh,
Better make that homework.
yes.
Well, we can do this on our own, but we don't know how yet.
I have one.
Yeah, we're still learning. All right, next week.
Okay.
In a world. All right, the quote is, in a world of role-playing personalities, those few people who don't project a mind-made image, but function from the deeper core of their being, who are simply themselves, stand out as remarkable and are the only ones who truly make a difference in this world. They are the bringers of the new consciousness. Their mere presence, simple, natural, unassuming, has a transformational effect on whoever they come into contact with. So it's not about projecting an image. It's not about playing a role. It's about eliminating all of that and then your inner light shines through naturally. And people see that, and they react and respond to that. Because it is something unusual for one thing, and it's something quite beautiful.
Your being just glitters.
Your
And
being
everyone has it within themselves. It's there all the time. All you have to do is allow it to shine. I'm sorry, what was
I
it?
just said, your being just glitters.
Your being glitters, yes. So yes, when you get rid of all these things, and this again was Tim Boyd's point at the end of his talk, was eliminating all of the things that cover up our true inner nature, peeling off the layers to reveal what is the essential nature of the individual at the core. In Sanskrit, he uses the word neti, not this, and they use it always 2 or 3 times, neti, neti, neti. It's not this, get rid of it. It's not that, get rid of that. It's not this. And when you're through, you've got nothing left, you think. But what you do have left is your true inner nature. And all along, that's all you're trying to do, is to uncover it. It's not about accumulating, it's about getting rid.
And Eckhart Tolle says something funny about this. When he helps, through his consultations and his teachings, when he helps people peel back their own onion layers and they realize that there's no more stuff to identify them as. I'm no longer identifying as a doctor, as a mother, as someone who drives this car. I'm pure consciousness, but wait a minute, I don't even know who I am anymore. And then he says, congratulations. Congratulations. You are no longer labeled as this, and that. When you're at a cocktail party, for example, when you're socializing at some type of event, and maybe you have a group of people you're talking with and you see someone over there that looks important, you say, who's that person over there? And then the answer is probably something like, oh, he's a 5-time award winner in this and this and this, and he helped do this, and he started this foundation. Oh, well, does that really tell you who he is as a person, or does that just give you all of his external labels? Okay, so now he's labeled, so I guess put him in a box there. You don't even need to go meet that person. He has nothing of value for you, you see. Or maybe you do want to go interact with him because your ego wants to interact with his ego. There's a lot of that goes on at cocktail parties. Oh, what do you do for a living? What do you do? Well, why are they asking that? Why does that matter? It's the idea that we were talking about with William. Why do you need to know that? Is it an ego enhancer, or is it just a thing? Is it an object that you're honoring? Is it a piece of information that you're neutrally talking about, or is it something to compare? Oh, well, if you're a professor, well, I'm not going to tell them what I do because I work at Smith's, or I have a doctorate, so I'm going to say, oh, you're a professor, I'm a doctor as well. So analyzing for yourself is what we're talking about. Just understand why, your own motives.
All right, we have a few minutes left, and we need to talk about...
Should we save that for next time, maybe? It's already 5:20.
Well, what do you... Let's at least introduce it.
Okay. Okay, so back to, Jim, back to our book PDF, please.
Page 32. All right, so we're talking about getting in touch with our higher self, our soul. And we want to start trying to understand it at least a little bit better. First of all, let's be very clear that there is no difference between spirit and matter other than a gradient. In the book, on page 32, most of you have your book here, we point out that there's no point along this gradient where you can say, okay, matter ends here and spirit begins. It's simply the fact that when manifestation occurs, you have to have a polarization. There's only one substance, whatever it is. But as you polarize it, then you can start seeing differences. Eventually, it will all pull back into a single something. But it isn't identifiable as long as there's no manifestation and no polarity. So, spirit is matter, matter is spirit. You can't separate one from the other except by relative degree. So when we speak of something as being spiritual, we're simply indicating that it is further along this continuum on the upward arc than something that is in the past or below it. It's simply a relative position, nothing else. Now, in Theosophy, this is one of the great things that Theosophy has brought into the world, is the different levels of the human constitution and of the planes of manifestation in general. This alone has made a lot of things far more comprehensible than they ever were before. And we have H.P. Blavatsky and some of the early theosophical writers for this. They were able to bring this into a somewhat intelligible way of expressing it. So we want to, first of all, be clear that these are not levels like in a bookcase. These are not stacked one on top of the other. Each one is a certain energy field. And you can't even say that one interpenetrates the other and extends beyond it. I've heard that said before, but I don't think that even makes sense. What happens is that as you increase in level of vibration, it takes on a different aspect. It's sort of like in your dreams. Do you notice in your dreams that the concept of space is very different from what you see in the physical world? You might think of a room in your house in your dreams, and it may appear 10 times bigger than it is in the physical world. Have any of you had that experience? I have. So it doesn't have the same qualities. It's a different level of experience.
A different dimension, you could think of it that way, or a different realm, or just a different state of consciousness altogether. A very poor example would be a fish in water coming into air, for example. That something like exiting this environment that we're used to, going into a different state of being altogether.
So our goal as human beings is really to achieve graduation from the human kingdom. It's that simple. That simple. Okay, so maybe it's not that simple, but that is the goal, is that just as at some point our consciousness graduated from the animal kingdom, at another point it will graduate from the human kingdom. And then we will go into another realm of expanded consciousness or learning experiences. Keep in mind that nothing ever stops as far as continued awareness, continued expansion of consciousness. There is no final goal. Even the logos of our planet, the logos of our solar system, are continuing to expand in consciousness. And guess what? Guess what? They can't make progress unless we make progress. You are a part of the planetary logos. You are a part of the solar logos. And your expansion of consciousness affects their expansion of consciousness at a level that we cannot comprehend. But we are intimately associated and involved with their own expansion of consciousness.
There's some comments here. We have from Meredith, she says this could be described perhaps as levels of the ocean. Pressure and light increase and decrease as you move higher and lower in the ocean. That's a pretty good representation. And Stacia says identification.
Identification with...
I kind of like what Meredith says about the ocean, because just like the descent into matter, the involutionary arc from the divine existence, can't even really be called an existence, it's the divine potential or the unmanifest. When the divine sends its sparks of divinity down into matter, we come down through different levels, as we're seeing here, from spirit down into matter, down to the physical, which Meredith is describing here as different levels in the ocean. At the very bottom of the ocean, there's tremendous pressure and not much light, and things move slowly down there. And it's just like the consciousness in the mineral kingdom, where there is no physical movement that we can perceive in the mineral kingdom until our consciousness expands to occupy the plant kingdom and the animal and the human and then the superhuman afterwards. And then Stacia, she says identification, density. Yeah, density.
All right, so this part of our being we're very much aware of. The physical, our prana that creates a living human physical body, the astral or the emotions, and our thought processes. Keep in mind that we know that the mind is different from the brain. The brain is nothing more than an instrument that conveys thoughts that are created by the mind. Science doesn't recognize that just yet, but they will. They had to modify a lot of things that they used to look at differently, and they are coming more and more into alignment with esoteric science. Here, you carry on for a while.
Okay. So we're at the level of the mind, and we have 4 minutes left. All right. Time flies when you have fun. Let's see here. I'm going to back up for a second and discuss. So the physical level through the lower mind level of consciousness. We call this the lower quaternary. These are the aspects of the human being that go away when the physical body dies, and the divine triad, the highest 3 levels, are the part of our being that is eternal, or in our terms, eternal, that remain when the physical body dies, and Paul Benedict will go away, so to speak. Paul Benedict is down here. The true self that is currently occupying this body is the divine triad. The Atma, which is a Sanskrit word that roughly translates into spirit or the breath, or something very, very pure, very, very divine, but one step down from true divinity. This is the highest part of the human being that can be still called individualistic. At its level, it is almost the exact same as everything else around it, which is the pure divine reality. The Atma can be considered as a focal point of being, a focal point of divinity. And there are 60 billion little focal points for all the human beings that exist, in incarnation and out of incarnation. One level down, buddhi, or what we call intuition. This is the level of ourself, very high, very refined, where very abstract intuition comes into our being. And we access this through deep meditation, and our goal is to be able to receive intuition and bring it down into our physical brain so we can utilize these things in the physical world. Otherwise, if we don't have the connection from our physical up to our spiritual aspects, there's no way that we can pull down or apply grand intuition. When Mozart composes his symphonies that have been so famous over the centuries, or when Einstein creates E equals mc squared, do you think he just came up with that randomly one day and just wrote it down? These are grand intuitions that these people have received from the part of their being which is connected to divinity. And they arguably didn't even create it. They just brought it through. They're instruments of the universe. These people have connections that every one of us can have. They're regarded geniuses. What's the plural of genius? Genii? They're genii. But really what they have in esoteric terms is they have a soul connection. They're bringing through beauty into this world from the divine, which we all can do. Okay, and then we're going to go into this a lot deeper in chapters to come, but the other levels here, let's see, we have the higher mind and the lower mind. So the mental plane where our mind exists, which is connected with our physical brain, the mind is on the lower levels of the mental plane, and what Theosophy calls the causal body or the soul, higher self, actually exists on the higher mental plane, which is this level here. So the soul is in the divine triad, which endures when the physical body and the personality, the emotions and things we create as a physical body die. So the divine triad exists, endures, and the lower quaternary is renewed with every incarnation.
If
All right, so it's 5:30.
if he can, Jim, if you can put up the quote from the Mahatma letters to A.P. Sinnett. I want to end our discussion today with giving you just a little bit of insight in what our goal is. We already said that it is to graduate from the human kingdom, which means achieving the level of an adept. Wait, he may not have that one. Oh, all right. This is a quote that comes from a book.
Jim, it starts with "Believe me."
Oh, yes, it is, Believe Me. This is a book that includes many letters that were written between 1880 and 1885. Many of them are very difficult to comprehend, but they have an enormous amount of little bits of insight. They were written by two adepts. And these are individuals who have graduated from the human kingdom, but who help humanity at this point in the background. They are not out in the world as everyday people, but they are in human form. And one of the things that one said early on was this: believe me, there comes a moment in the life of an adept when the hardships he has passed through are 1,000-fold rewarded. In order to acquire further knowledge, he has no more to go through a minute and slow process of investigation and comparison of various objects, but is accorded an instantaneous implicit insight into every first truth. The adept sees and feels and lives in the very source of all fundamental truths, the universal spiritual essence of nature. So what that means is that an adept no longer has to achieve understanding through using the mind, but instead it comes through the intuition, through buddhi. And he can tune directly into that concept, to that universal truth. In other words, it's almost like a supercomputer that the adept has access to and can access that information instantaneously rather than reading it word by word. In fact, it can't be expressed in words in most cases, but they have an insight that gives them an understanding that goes far beyond what we as human beings can achieve. They can see all of the past causes that we can't see if they choose to. They can choose to focus wherever they want, at whatever level of nirvana that they choose to, because they have achieved perfection in the art of Raja Yoga. All right, that I think concludes our class for today. We'll stick around for a few minutes for anyone who wants to ask questions or chat a little bit, but for those who need to get going, the online students, if you have other things to take care of, that will be the end of our class for today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Any last words?
Thank you.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're going to give a little more information about this chart, and then we'll go directly into chapter 3. Right. I want to mention for those of you who are here that Paul is going to start teaching a class on Sundays at the yoga studio where he teaches. And it is a combination of Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga. So Sundays at 2 o'clock.
Here in Las Vegas.
Here in
Everybody
Las
wants to
Vegas.
fly in.
At the Yoga Sanctuary on just about block up the street here.
Look at what Rhonda says.
What is-
Thank you, SEB1 and SEB2.
Really?
You know,